June 25th, 1941. 0900 hours. A crossroads on the dusty Lithuanian plain, 3 kilometers north of the town of Raseiniai. The summer heat was already brutal, the air tasting of cordite and diesel smoke. A German soldier from Kampfgruppe Raus approached a Soviet tank on foot, slowly, rifle forward, boots scraping gravel, because the machine had gone silent at last. It had taken 2 full days, 50 panzers as a distraction, an 88mm FlaK gun firing 13 consecutive rounds, night raids by combat engineers, 50mm anti-tank rounds bouncing off like thrown stones. The soldier reached the hull. He knocked on the armor with his bare fist, the way a man knocks on a door he hopes no one will answer. Then the turret moved. Men screamed. They ran. Because inside that 46-ton steel shell, something, or someone, was still alive. And this is where we begin. 1 tank, 6 men, against the full mechanized weight of the German 6th Panzer Division, an elite armored formation that had already torn through Soviet defenses across 300 kilometers of Lithuanian countryside in less than 72 hours. The tank was a KV-1, the Kliment Voroshilov. Designed by Joseph Kotin at the Kirov factory in Leningrad, it weighed 46 tons and wore armor between 37 and 78 millimeters thick. Armor that the German Panzer 35's 37mm gun could not touch, could not even scratch. The Germans had never encountered a machine like it. Their standard anti-tank weapons, their standard tanks, their standard tactics, none of it worked. And yet, 2 days before the moment we just witnessed, these 6 men had made a decision that nobody ordered them to make. They had driven their tank to a crossroads and stopped, waiting, alone, outnumbered by an entire division. Nobody radioed for help. There is no surviving record of any command ordering this crew to hold that crossroads. No documented mission briefing, no tactical plan. What we know comes primarily from the after-action reports of the men trying to destroy them, specifically from the account of General Erhard Raus, commander of the Kampfgruppe that bore his name, a man who later described the encounter with barely concealed awe. The 6 men inside that KV-1 blocked a critical supply artery connecting German forward units with their rear headquarters for nearly 48 hours. Ammunition convoys could not pass. Fuel trucks turned around. Wounded soldiers could not be evacuated. An entire Kampfgruppe, armored, supplied, trained, was brought to a standstill by 1 tank and a crew whose full name's history has not been able to preserve. We do not know who gave the order to stop at that crossroads. The evidence suggests no one did. If you want to see how 6 nameless Soviet tankmen held an entire German Panzer Division at a Lithuanian crossroads, how they held through the night, survived explosives, shrugged off anti-tank shells, and kept that turret turning until the very last moment, here is what I ask. Hit subscribe. It is your way of saying this story reached you. Drop a like if it moved you. And tell us in the comments what you know about the Battle of Raseiniai, the KV-1, or the Eastern Front in 1941. Your engagement helps us bring more forgotten stories exactly like this one to light. These are the stories that deserve to be told, not because they ended in victory, but because the men inside that tank chose to stay when every instinct and every rational calculation said leave. Now, back to Lithuania. Back to June 22nd, 1941. 4 days before that turret moved, a storm unlike anything the world had seen was just beginning. At 0300 hours on June 22, 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in human history. Approximately 4 million Axis soldiers crossed into Soviet territory simultaneously along a front stretching 2,900 kilometers from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. Army Group North, supported by Luftflotte 1, drove through the Baltic states toward Leningrad with the objective of securing that city within weeks. The Soviet Northwestern Front, irresponsible for defending this sector, had 28 rifle divisions, 4 tank divisions, and 2 motorized divisions. On paper, an imposing force. In practice, a disaster. Within hours of the invasion's opening, Luftflotte 1's aerial campaign had destroyed the majority of Soviet communications infrastructure across the entire theater. Units lost contact with each other and with higher command. Orders arrived late or not at all. Commanders made decisions based on rumors, and the Germans moved through the gaps like water through a cracked hull, fast, relentless, and with devastating precision. The German 6th Panzer Division had been assigned to Army Group North's advance through central Lithuania, tasked with crossing the Neman and Dubysa rivers and clearing the route toward the interior. The division was organized as Kampfgruppe Raus, and named for its operational commander, Generaloberst Erhard Raus, a meticulous, methodical officer with a deep respect for combined arms doctrine. His primary armored element was the Panzer 35T, a Czech-designed tank the Wehrmacht had absorbed after the occupation of Czechoslovakia. The Panzer 35T weighed approximately 10.5 tons and carried a 37mm KWK-34T main gun. Against most Soviet armor of the era, this was adequate. Against the KV-1, it was a toy. The 37mm round would strike the KV's 75 to 78mm frontal hull armor and simply stop. No penetration, no damage, sometimes not even a scratch on the paint. German tankers reported watching their shells bounce off and fall to the ground. They called it impossible, zero effect. By the morning of June 23rd, as the 6th Panzer Division had secured the Dubysa River bridgehead east of Raseiniai after fierce fighting against Soviet armored counterattacks. The Soviet 2nd Tank Division, part of the 3rd Mechanized Corps, had attempted several concentrated armored thrusts to drive the Germans back across the river. All failed, not from lack of courage or equipment, but from a catastrophic failure of coordination. Soviet tank units attacked piecemeal, without synchronized artillery support, without infantry backup, often striking what they believed to be the German flank only to run directly into the prepared front. Communications, already shattered by the Luftwaffe's opening day strikes, gave commanders no ability to adjust. By nightfall on June 23rd, the Soviet Northwestern Front was in deep retreat across this entire sector. Burning tank hulls, including at least 29 KVs, littered the approaches to Raseiniai. The battle, strategically, was lost, but one KV-1 had not yet received that message, or simply chosen to ignore it. The night of June 23rd was warm, the Lithuanian summer refusing to give ground even after dark. At some point during that night, the exact hour unrecorded, a single Soviet KV-1 tank drove to a crossroads on the main supply road north of Raseiniai and stopped. Locals in the area would later recall simply seeing the tank appear, lights off, engine cut, sitting. The KV-1 Model 1940 carried a 76.2mm F-32 main gun with 111 rounds of ammunition. It had 3 7.62mm DT machine guns. Its V2K diesel engine produced 600 horsepower, driving the 46-ton machine at a maximum road speed of approximately 22 miles per hour. Its frontal armor was 75mm thick, impervious to every tank-mounted weapon in the German inventory at that stage of the war. Inside, 5, possibly 6 men settled into the sweltering confines of the hull and turret, their leather tankers' helmets already damp with sweat, and waited for first light. For whatever was coming. The morning of June 24th began ordinarily enough for Kampfgruppe Raus. Supply convoys were moving westward, carrying wounded soldiers and captured Soviet prisoners back from the front line toward rear staging areas near Raseiniai. Then, at approximately 0800 hours, the lead vehicle of one such convoy reached the crossroads. The KV opened fire. The convoy reversed immediately, drivers wrestling trucks and half-tracks into desperate backward turns on a road barely wide enough for the vehicles themselves. Word reached Kampfgruppe Raus headquarters. Something was blocking the crossroads north of the river. A large vehicle. Soviet. General Raus initially assumed he was looking at the forward edge of a larger Soviet counterattack, possibly the beginning of a coordinated armored assault to retake the bridgehead. He mobilized accordingly, committing armored and infantry assets to identify and destroy what he believed was a significant threat. What he was actually dealing with was one tank, and possibly one man who had decided enough was enough. The first German response was methodical: anti-tank guns. Multiple 50mm PaK-38 anti-tank guns were positioned at various angles around the crossroads and opened fire on the KV-1. The results were immediate and humiliating. Round after round struck the hull and turret, and stopped. The KV's armor was simply too thick. The 50mm round, capable of penetrating approximately 78mm of vertical plate at 100 meters, was meeting the KV's 75mm frontal glacis at unfavorable angles, and the sloped sections of the hull were absorbing impacts that should have been fatal to any other tank on that battlefield. The KV crew replied, not indiscriminately, with deliberate aimed fire from the 76.2mm F-32, targeting the gun positions. Multiple anti-tank gun crews were annihilated in the initial exchange. The pieces of the guns lay scattered around their positions, crews gone. General Raus looked at the reports coming back from the crossroads and, by all accounts, felt something between professional admiration and genuine alarm. His division was being held by a ghost. With anti-tank guns failing, Kampfgruppe, Raus brought forward a 105mm LFH-18 field howitzer, a weapon capable, in theory, of delivering enough kinetic energy to crack the KV's armor at medium range. The problem was geometry. To position the howitzer at a range where accuracy was reliable, roughly 400 to 600 meters, the crew had to expose themselves directly to the KV's line of sight and line of fire. Every attempt to bring the howitzer forward was met with machine gun fire from the KV. The howitzer crews tried firing from maximum range, over 10,000 meters in indirect arc, but the KV was too small a target for plunging high-trajectory fire to find consistently. The rounds fell wide. The Soviet crew did not respond to near misses with any change in position or behavior. They did not move, did not retreat, simply waited for the next attempt and responded with more fire. By midday on June 24th, the Germans had expended significant ammunition and suffered multiple casualties without landing a single effective hit. Then came the 88mm. The 8.8-centimeter FlaK 36 was Germany's premier anti-aircraft artillery piece, a weapon originally designed to shoot down aircraft at altitude, now being pressed into service as an anti-tank gun with lethal effectiveness. The 88mm round could penetrate approximately 99mm of vertical rolled homogeneous armor at 1,000 meters, theoretically enough to crack the KV-1's hull. A German crew maneuvered the gun into position approximately 700 meters from the KV, working carefully, using terrain features to mask their approach. The KV crew spotted them. The 76.2mm main gun rotated and fired. The 88mm emplacement was destroyed before it could send a single round downrange. Nothing. The German crew was dead. The gun was gone. Raus and his staff stared at the situation map and confronted a reality that no part of their pre-war doctrine had prepared them for. They were dealing with a machine that could absorb their standard weapons, identify and destroy their heavy weapons, and had been doing so for most of an entire day without any sign of weakening. Night fell on June 24th. The KV had not moved. German combat engineers, sappers, were dispatched under cover of darkness to plant explosive charges directly on the tank's tracks. The idea, if the tracks could be destroyed, the tank would be immobilized, and a helpless 46-ton steel box could then be dealt with at leisure. The sappers crawled through Lithuanian summer grass under a sky that offered no cover. The KV's crew heard them. The machine guns opened up. Muzzle flashes tore the darkness. Several sappers were killed in the open. The survivors managed to reach the tank and attach two explosive devices, one to the tracks, one to the main gun barrel. The charges detonated. The sappers pulled back. The smoke cleared. The tracks were undamaged. The gun barrel was undamaged. The explosives had not even scratched the paint on this particular section of hull. A German officer surveying the result reportedly used a single word: impossible. The morning of June 25th arrived, and Rouse faced a command problem unlike any in his career. His supply lines had been severed for over 30 hours. Ammunition was reaching critical levels for forward units. Fuel was becoming the concern, and his entire division, nearly 5,000 men by some accounts, with hundreds of vehicles, was being bottlenecked by one tank that would not die. Inside the KV, the crew had been baking in temperatures that would have exceeded 40 degrees Celsius in the sealed hull under the summer sun. The concussive shock of dozens of 50-millimeter impacts over 2 days had taken a physical toll. Eardrums ruptured, blood from noses and ears, the world reduced to vibration and noise and the smell of hot steel. They had almost certainly used a significant portion of their 111 main gun rounds. They must have known they could not hold indefinitely. They held anyway. Rouse convened his staff and laid out the new plan. 50 panzers, one carefully hidden 88mm, and the element of distraction. The German plan was elegant in its desperation. A 50 Panzer 35 T tanks would approach the K5 from multiple directions simultaneously, simulating a coordinated assault. The KV crew would be forced to rotate the turret repeatedly, engaging targets across a wide arc, buying time, creating noise, providing distraction. Simultaneously, a second 88mm FlaK gun would be moved into position under cover of the Panzer approach, positioned to fire from an angle the KV's turret crew would not be monitoring. The approach began at approximately 0900 hours on June 25th. The 50 Panzers spread across the flat Lithuanian plain, engines roaring, dust rising in great plumes. The KV engaged them, systematically, methodically, rotating and firing. Inside that hull, the noise must have been beyond description. Every Panzer impact rang through the steel. The 88mm, meanwhile, was being dragged forward by its crew on foot, slow, quiet, using every fold of ground available. The crew knew what had happened to the last 88mm that the KV crew had spotted. They moved as if their lives depended on invisibility. They did. The 88mm opened fire. The first round struck the KV's hull. A dent, significant, but not a penetration. The KV crew, occupied with the circling panzers, did not immediately identify the new threat. The second round, third. The German crew worked the gun as fast as the weapon's sustained rate of fire allowed, approximately 15 rounds per minute. Each impact rang through the steel walls with a violence that the crew inside could not avoid. Their hearing had already been gone for hours. Blood from earlier concussions, bodies braced against the interior. But the KV kept firing at the panzers. The turret kept rotating. Fourth round, fifth, sixth. By the seventh and eighth impacts, cracks were beginning to form in the armor around the impact zones. The 88mm crew kept firing. 9, 10, 11, 12. Each round from a perfectly maintained angle, crew methodical, hands not shaking because shaking hands meant missing. At the 13th direct hit, silence. The KV stopped firing. The turret went still. The panzers stopped. The field fell quiet in the way that battlefields go quiet, not peacefully, but in the held breath of men who do not yet know whether the danger has truly ended. German soldiers approached the K5 on foot, slowly, rifles ready. The hull was now marked by 14 visible impact craters, 2 of which had fully penetrated the armor, both from the 88mm final shots at close range. One soldier reached the tank and knocked on the hull with his fist. a single knock. The kind a man makes when he already knows no one is home but cannot quite bring himself to believe it. Then the turret moved. It was a single, slow rotation of perhaps 15 degrees. That was all. Screaming, running. Every man in the vicinity abandoning his position. A grenade was thrown through one of the two penetration holes made by the 88mm. The explosion drove open the turret hatch from inside. German soldiers approached again, slowly, and looked through the hatch. 6 men, all dead. The turret movement had been a final involuntary reflex, a dying hand on a traverse lever. The Germans found 6 bodies inside the tank. 5 were crew, consistent with the KV-1's standard complement of commander, gunner, loader, driver, and hull machine gunner. Yet the 6th person's identity has never been established. A passenger, a wounded soldier from the 2nd Tank Division, someone who had simply climbed in and refused to leave. No one knows. What the Germans did next was almost without precedent on the Eastern Front in June 1941, a front already soaked in brutality on both sides. They buried them, with military honors, in marked graves. General Raus, in his post-war memoirs, described the crew as among the most determined soldiers his division encountered during the entire Eastern Campaign. That is not a small statement from a man who spent 4 years fighting on that front. The graves were later moved. In 1965, the remains, whatever could still be identified, were transferred to the Soviet military cemetery in Raseiniai. The stone carries 2 names, Yershov, P.E. Smirnov, V.A. One set of initials, S.H.N.A. 3 warriors remain unknown. They are no less present for it. The implications of that single KV-1's stand rippled through the German high command faster than the battle reports themselves. By November 1941, Wehrmacht headquarters had convened an emergency Panzer Commission, a technical commission specifically assembled to study the T-34 and K-1 and determine how Germany's armored forces should respond. The commission concluded that the standard arsenal of German tank weaponry was inadequate against Soviet heavy armor, and that a new generation of tank was urgently required. The Tiger I, already in development, was accelerated. The 88mm gun, proven in the field by the actions at Raseiniai and other engagements, was formally adopted as the primary anti-tank weapon of the Wehrmacht and served as the basis for the Tiger's main armament. One tank had changed the direction of German tank development. One crew, whose names are mostly lost, had forced the most advanced military machine in the world to reconsider everything it knew about armored warfare. The KV-1 at Raseiniai did not win a battle. It rewrote a doctrine. In 1965, a ceremony took place at the Soviet military cemetery in Raseiniai, Lithuania. The remains of the crew were transferred to a permanent memorial grave. The stone was carved with the names that research could recover: Yershov, P.E. Smirnov, V.A., initials S.H.N.A. 3 names were left blank, not because the men did not exist, but because the documents identifying them had been buried in a forest north of Raseiniai during the Soviet retreat and were never found. They held a crossroads for 2 days against a German Panzer Division with 1 tank, 6 men, 111 shells, and the simple refusal to leave. They did not hold it to change history. They did not know they would change history. They held it because holding it was the thing to do in that moment with what they had. 80 years later, the crossroads still stands. The summer grass still grows where the 88mm once dug in, and the stone in Raseiniai carries 5 words and 3 blank spaces, which is more than enough. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more forgotten stories to light. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?